Welcome to our first AAC Collaboration Corner. These are our running meeting notes. Today we are October 3rd, looking at the Introduction to Augmentative Alternative Communication, or AAC.
And I think this type of group really lends itself well to a mixed ability group like this, because the intention behind this collaboration corner is for all of us to come and bring our voices around a certain topic of the month. I've been running a similar group in the school district that I also work for in Bellevue, and we've been doing it for, gosh, almost 10 years now. And people who, coach others with AAC all the way to people who have no idea how to implement AAC join these groups. And so we can, kind of facilitate some of those conversations and mentor each other. But a lot of times making decisions around AAC is difficult for everybody, even the most advanced people. So we're glad that you're all here today.
So true. Thanks, Sarah. Chelsea says, I'm new to working with the library and inclusive services, so I'd like to be familiar with supports for our patrons. Neat, Chelsea. We'd probably like to hear a little bit more about that. Christina says, I'd like to be able to collaborate with SLPs in the schools where I work with vision students. Wonderful. Nellie wants to know about funding for AAC, and that is one of our topics. That'll be coming up in December, I think, right, Sarah? But we can talk about that today if we get to it as well. Lori said supporting AAC users and inclusion. Marissa said supporting students by making sure staff have buy-in to model, but need to help with implementation piece and getting staff buy-in. Yep. I think that's next week's topic too. So that'll be fantastic. But all of this we can talk about anytime.
This is Julie. I think I'd just like to know more about kind of that vision component piece when you're talking about kids that have CVI and also are trying to use eye gaze, and how modeling should look. So I'm a part of a big team, and I just want to make sure that I am saying kind of what standard, like, I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, great question. Well, I think we could just hop right into that. We do kind of have a 101 feature for today, but since there is so many kind of specific questions, and I think it'd be nice to just kind of go with what you all want to know about. Sarah, do you have any thoughts right off the bat about this that you want to share? Or anybody else, by the way, hop in, because this is a collaboration.
So the first question that I heard was, can you use eye gaze with students who have CVI? Is that one of your questions, Julie?
I don't think it's a can, because it is being used with students that have CVI. I just don't know the best way to model or to coach the rest of my team on how to model to get them to look in a specific area in a way that's not too overwhelming and making it too complex, but still models how to use it for communication.
That's a good question. So I'll start off by talking about just like modeling in general, and then maybe you can like add on to that with your TVI lens, and we can come up with an idea together. So when I've supported students who use eye gaze, oftentimes I will still model using direct select. So I will still model by touching the symbol. And that's, just going back to that idea of aided language stimulation. So you can either do keyword modeling, depending on the level the student's at, where you pick one word to touch and model as you're talking. So maybe you say the whole thing and then you touch one word. Or it could be, if you're specifically teaching a certain word, that you're finding opportunities to model that one word throughout the day as well. And as far as like getting the eyes to go there, there's different strategies I've done, more so with low tech boards, where I've used some sort of pointer, or, it could be like a pipe cleaner with a circle, like a window, something sparkly, or sometimes I'll use a light pen, depending on the vision needs of the student, something to direct the gaze there. But I think the other component of that is attributing meaning to whatever it is that the student does select, even if it may be exploratory or unintentional. So they happen to like look and activate a symbol, then you might say, oh, you said more. Do you want to play more of the game? You know, even if they may have just been exploring and they just picked more. How does that land for you?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of where we're at, is I'm trying to figure out what visually is going to be motivating for each student to see, because I think they're all different. And so I work with Megan, who's also on here, I think, and we're moving more towards, I think we were doing a lot of quizzing before, and we're trying to use more towards using it for communication. And what I've noticed the last couple of times is that they're modeling every single word. And so to me, for my kids that struggle with complexity, then that's a lot, because now you've done 10 different things and I don't think they're following. So I guess, like, what is best practice? Are we focusing on one word, you know, in a book, or is it on a certain subject? And like, kind of how do we coach our users who are doing this every day and like the majority of the time to keep it within our students? So, but I'm not familiar with AAC very much. So I don't know, like, is it one word? Is it 3 words? Should you stay on one page, or should you be navigating between pages? Like, where's a good place to start? Because I think we're at that starting point.
Yeah, those are really good questions. And Sari, I think you probably have a lot to say about this. Depending who you talk to, which expert you talk to in the field, you might hear 2 different answers. So I'll just start by saying that I think a lot of the research talks about keyword modeling, and a lot of what I have coached on in the past is pick a word or 2, depending on the level the student's at. You typically would pick around the same level that they're at or increase it by 1. So if they are independently selecting 1 word, you might model 2. Or if they're not selecting any independently, spontaneously, you might just model 1. But if you talk to some adult AAC users, you're going to start to hear some things where they do say that they are advocates of modeling every single word of a grammatically complete sentence. So I'll just throw that out there. But what I typically do is keyword modeling for the purpose of aided language stimulation, which means just using these picture symbols to represent our language. Now, if I am trying to teach a specific word, then I might find a book or an activity where I can frequently model that 1 word. And maybe I'm doing those things, you know, together, depending on the time of day. Maybe I'm modeling consistently throughout the day, but then in this structured time setting, we're working on modeling the word go, because that's our core word of the day or the week. Does that make sense?
That does. It spurred a follow-up question. Do you ever have a low-tech version that is not have the screen brightness, but is like that page, and you model it on there if they need a break from their AAC?
You absolutely can. This is, I think, specifically to, it could be for different reasons, but in this case, for that visual fatigue maybe, or the screen brightness, reasons like that, my recommendation would be to keep the layout the same. So keep the symbols in the same location, so that consistently reinforces that motor planning. You know, I look to the left side middle and I know it's going to be the symbol for I, or whatever it is. But yes, you can have a low tech version. Sari, did you want to add on to that as well?
No, yeah, I think that's great. I think the low tech is a great. I think all eye gaze users probably should have some low tech version available of something, just because of fatigue and how hard it is to do eye gaze, and when by the time they're home or early in the morning or they're sick, whatever it is, I think that's really helpful. And then I think also in that same point, like, if you're doing, this isn't about modeling, but just eye gaze in general, if you're doing eye gaze activities, if you're really working hard, you know, during this time, making sure that they do have a break for, I mean, you guys as vision specialists know this, but having some like far distance things versus up close. So maybe you're doing, if you're reading a book, maybe you are holding it farther than their device. You know, their device is always at 18 to 22 inches. Maybe you have the pictures behind it every once in a while. But I'd like Sarah's suggestion about books and things like that, because like what Megan is saying about coaching and, teaching versus testing, right? when you're reading, it's easy to say, what did that mean? Those kind of things. But just thinking about what is your goal? We talk about this a lot. Like, what is your goal in this situation? Is it a vision goal right now? Is it communication? Is it a literacy goal? So just kind of having that in the back of your head, right? In general, I'm thinking about the student's vision, but right now, I just want them to use their vision so they can communicate with me, right?
That helps. So I guess to go even more specific, if you were reading a book about fall and it had like, feelings or something, or like, I don't know, something in it, would it be okay to focus on just like, hey, we're talking about feelings, we're on that feelings page, and at each one I'm going to model where that one is, but the book changes, right? It's not the same feeling. So it could potentially be 6 or 8 words. Is that appropriate to use in that instance, or should we be looking for something that really models the same word over and over? And these are students that are really, I would say, beginning AAC users, starting just to interact with the device.
So Sarah, you can add into this. And actually, I know we have a lot of experienced SLPs here too, so I'll open it up to others to say too. But I mean, I think I tend to be not too rigid with like the way I'm doing it. So there may be people who say, no, this is what you should do. But I tend to say, kind of go with the flow. And if they really are enjoying talking about some of those feelings, like maybe it's like funny or something like that, and my student is enjoying that, I will keep modeling some of those feelings. Or if I think, I think feelings are going to be really important for this person because I can see they're going to need to tell me how they're uncomfortable. So I want to make sure that when uncomfortable shows up in this book, I can show her where that is. I think that's important. I especially think any medical type physical things are important for our students with complex bodies because they can't communicate that well. But at the end of the day, you're doing a lot of receptive modeling for that student, and they're getting a lot of receptive language from this. And then also seeing how you can use it in different contexts.
I think to add on to that and emphasize one piece of what you said is following the child's lead as much as you can, just trying to make it as engaging for them as possible. And so if they're really interested in that and they're wanting to talk about that, yeah, keep going with it. Even if you are doing book reading, if this is a student who has emergent literacy, we should be following their lead. We should be commenting and engaging with them and connecting to their life in other ways through the book. And, it's less about like the quizzing and asking questions about the comprehension of the text itself. And it's more about communication around what you're talking about.
I have something to add to that, Julie. I think it also depends on your student and what your focus is. If you're trying to teach the word feel, then you can just like repetitively model that word feeling. Oh, now they're feeling sad, now they're feeling happy. But if you're wanting it to be more meaningful and like kind of fun, I might target something like maybe you really notice that this kid feels sad a lot. So you might be like, oh, look, this person is feeling so happy. Are they feeling sad? No, they're feeling happy. And then the next page, oh, now they're really excited. Are they feeling sad? No, now they're excited or whatever. So you're like modeling sad often and really focusing on that one that you're hoping to teach them in a way that's still like kind of flexes with the book, but still really re-emphasizing and modeling often that target word you want to say versus, feel might be a little broad depending on where your user is. And I don't know if that makes sense or helpful, but just an idea.
That's super helpful. I feel like right now the modeling that we're getting is like the boy, 3 pages, boy is feeling, go to the feeling, sad, 2 pages, sad. And there's not a lot of continuity. I feel like it's not very engaging for the student and they're not. So I think following along, and I like that idea. So I'm going to suggest we try to model that or
I agree. Yeah, that's good. And the way you explain that makes me say, yes, definitely go with like the keywords in that situation because nobody wants to read a book that way anyway. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I had a good conversation with a very experienced AAC SLP recently about is it better to read the book all the way through first and then model and talk about it? Or is it better to, model with each word? And, I don't know the right answer. Maybe you do both. Maybe you read it all the way through first, and then on the second read, you're modeling while you go. But yeah, no one, to Sarah's point, like no one wants to sit there and like wait for someone to model complete sentence after every single page. And I often encourage SLPs to model just the front page. If you can find a core word, if the student's very new to AAC, find a word that can fit flexibly. It doesn't have to necessarily be the perfect word that's 5 levels deep. Just find something on that main page and model that. And the other thought I had about the sad example, if you could make it like silly or interesting, depending on the age of your student and their preferences, sometimes, I might like be dramatic and be like sad, like just something that makes the student like giggle and something that's fun and engaging for them.
So let's see. I know there's at least one person who is really new to AAC. And since our topic is kind of AAC 101, I thought it might be nice to talk about that a little bit. Where do you go for resources, or what does this even mean? If you are new, some of this might have been really might have been a little confusing or overwhelming to hear the modeling conversations. But as you can see, you really can't do things too wrong, I think, as long as you're following the student's lead and you're there to have communication, to have that back and forth. That's what it's all about. But on our resource list here, and please feel free to add resources in these topics. There's a few resources we have, and we'd love to hear from you. This first one is a module that you can do from the AAC Learning Center, and it's AAC Introduction. I actually haven't gone through the module. I have it pulled up here, and so you can kind of see what it's about. They used different children for examples, and they have just kind of some overall key principles that you'll learn about. But I would love to see if there's others. I'm not sure how updated this one is. If you have other modules that parents or new SLPs can do, we'd love to have that in our notes to be able to share. Another resource that is great is if you're familiar with NWACS, they have a great website and blog with AAC information. And so they have this AAC information for educators. And they have the whole section that's new to AAC. They have myths and facts. Some things you might hear, like, does AAC stop you from talking? No, it doesn't. And then you have information about it. Types of AAC. There's high tech and low tech, that what you talked about with the eye gaze. All sorts of offerings here, and the same for parents. I think it's pretty similar, but has a little different focus. Getting started with AAC. And I do know that on their website, there's a funding conversation recorded, because I was at that conversation. So Nellie or somebody was asking about funding, so we can talk about that. But
recently we're using Tar Heel gameplay on an AAC, which I know isn't necessarily for communication, but it was a way to interact with it. And I didn't know if you knew of anything else that was similar to that, that was available as like a choice or something we could use for some more cause and effect.
Let me pull up Tar Heel gameplay for those who. So Tar Heel gameplay is like a switch or a stop and go. It's like basically takes a YouTube video and it allows the user to stop and go the game or the video. So you could do wheels on the bus, and it'll stop. And then you hit the switch or you select to continue it. So depending on the device the student's using, they have eye gaze games built into the device. Is this a switch or an eye gaze activity?
I've used it for both, but I'm specifically thinking eye gaze. And the reason some of my kids, they just have different devices and I couldn't tell you necessarily the names of all of them. But a lot of the games aren't really CVI friendly. They're very busy and very complex. And so I didn't know the Tar Heel ones, they're used to seeing those videos, the ones we've made. And so it's a familiar thing. So I think it's easier for them to watch it and they're engaged. So I just didn't know if there was another free way to get some more games or interaction things.
Yeah. I know that Toby Dynabox has online eye gaze, like eye gaze training. There's also Look to Learn. Do have you guys used Look to Learn?
Yeah.
I don't know how CVI friendly they are though.
Like I don't remember which kid has which one. Like some have access to some games that are better than others. That was the first time I'd seen the Tar Heel integrated into a choice. Like he chose what video he wanted to watch and it opened up directly into the Tar Heel gameplay, which was really cool. It needed a person to then exit out of it to get back to your communicator program. But I just thought if there was anything else out there that I didn't know of that we could put on there just to increase the things they have access to would be fun.
There's a resource that I love, but it's not free. So that's the only problem. You may have heard of it before. It's called Help Kids Learn. And they have a couple different ways you can access. There's a games and activities part of Help Kids Learn. And then there's also Choose It Maker 3 where you can create your own. And those are very CVI friendly. They're high contrast. They're very simple. So this is Help Kids Learn, the games and activities. And you can sort by the learning objective. So starting at, the more basic cause effect level all the way up to choice making. And so if let's say I unselect them all and we just look at cause effect, and several of these you can change the access method. They've changed the settings a little bit. Let's see if you go here. So you set up your student profile and you can choose whether they access it through eye gaze or one switch or two switches or direct select. But when you play it, they're just very simple. They have some basic sounds and music. It made a ding sound and then you hit the switch or you look at it and it has some music that plays and it's all high contrast. And again, you can customize it for your individual student. So I absolutely love it. You can also put it on apps on an iPad or this is on a PC, obviously, but it is paid. So you would have to have a subscription for it.
Is it a subscription by the district or is it one for each user, like each kid?
You can do it either way, I believe. So we, in the district I work for, we have different school buildings that have subscriptions for it. So anyone in that building can use it, but I think you can do individual licenses as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you. No, that looks really nice. And I'm gonna look into that.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. On Toby, and I probably will need to learn about this a little bit more, but they have also some eye gaze games. And then I believe you could pull this up. I need to double check on this. I believe you can pull it up on any device and do it with like through the browser. But if your student has a Toby device, then it would be on there. The accent, if your student has an accent, they have eye gaze training games on it. Nellie, I do have a question about the funding. Are you thinking specifically personally funded devices or through the district?
Through the district. I've learned about AbleNet and I don't know how I feel about, the confidentiality portion of it. Like, do I go ahead and give AbleNet parent contact information? Do I give parent a paper for them to contact AbleNet? Today I have a meeting where I would like the parent to contact or do the 30-day trial for Toby.
Mhm.
And I printed out the document, but now I'm like, so what happens next? What do I do? What part do I help the family with? I'm just there.
Yeah, it's really tricky. And my advice changes depending on when you ask me. So pre-pandemic, I really tried to offer a district version of whatever device or system I could offer that met their academic needs. Then starting in the pandemic and through a couple years after that, I started really helping families with those funding, like the funding process on their own. And on the one hand, it's really nice because you're working with the family, you're hopefully training the family if you can. They're doing it through their insurance, but it requires a letter of justification, oftentimes from an SLP. So that would be your component. But the nice part about it is that I would loop in whatever device representative there was. So if we were purchasing a Tobii Dynavox device, then I would, call in the Tobii rep for our area, and they would really take over a lot of that funding work and, kind of facilitate the process, which was nice. The challenge with it from a school-based perspective is that sometimes the family, once they've gone through insurance and done that whole process, they don't want to send the device to school. So then it's like we've done all this work as a school district to have this device come to school, and it's not, and we're still left in the same place. So it can be really tricky. I think, my best advice would just be to work closely with the family if possible, and, to let them know the process and that this would be in order to support their communication across their entire day, which includes coming to school. So just, setting that up from the outset. And if you can partner with the device company representative, that would be super helpful in that process.
Okay, thank you.
Chelsea said, Inclusive Services is a department of the Brooklyn Public Library that provides programs for kids with disabilities. Cool. We do accessible story and play times, organize resource fairs, and advise the library on accessibility. That's really neat, Chelsea. I know that we are trying to build our library of, actually I have a good resource of books that feature kids with disabilities. And Sarah has a list, I think, right? Is that something you can share, Sarah?
Yeah, let me see if I can find a shareable link. If I can't do it on the spot now, I might have to send it out after.
Yeah. And while you're doing that, this is going to change how we find this right now. It's a little bit tricky, but we have an online book collection that I'll put the direct link in there in our technology resources under communication and literacy. This is going to be moved onto our main site soon. We're in the process, but we have this comprehensive literacy for all book collection. And what's really neat is we have I don't remember how many books, over 100 books that we have this wonderful volunteer who has made all of these supports to go with these books. So let's say we do Bad Case of the Stripes. It has a link to the book on Amazon. So this could be something that you pull up, right? You have closed captions on, have the student access for the kids to listen to the book in a different way. And then it has this link to a literacy planning sheet. Here's the story, read aloud, a literacy planning sheet. And most of these have different ideas for multiple times that you're reading the story. Because we know that's one of the strategies for emergent readers is to read the story multiple times. So it might be like the first time you're reading it is for drama and you're just encouraging participation. So you might have students commenting and you can give them a button that says, oh no, or something like that. And so that might even be something neat to have in your library if you had some sort of budget, is a little button that you can record. These are just pre-recordable buttons just for participation, and any student could use that, any child. Different ideas for reading. So this one, number 3, maybe your goal is comprehension and you're going to draw shapes on the whiteboard to pair with pictures. This is again for Bad Case of Stripes. And so she's provided all you need for that activity here. She's already made the picture symbols with the words. and you can just print that out. And then she also has an idea of materials you might want, and then activity expansions. So there's a definition chart. There's often like some sort of craft you can do. You can do self-portraits and paint them with stripes or polka dots. So she has all these different ideas, sometimes a cooking activity. I just can't even tell you how much is available here. It's really amazing. And once this gets onto our main site, it'll be easier to find.
What that is that I put in there is something I created for librarians in our school district that has different disability related months. So like, for example, right now is October, it's AAC Awareness Month. So in that month with what actually October has a ton of different awarenesses and things happening. But then on the second page of this calendar, you'll see different books that are related to each of the themes. And this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but books that would target a character who uses AAC. Some examples would be A Day with No Words, More Than Words, How Katie Got Her Voice, and Dancing with Daddy. So it's a calendar with those disability related dates. And then on the second page, some associated books. And those are really cool for libraries because you might want to like feature that one book or a couple books around that theme.
Lori said you can buy packages of single messages on Amazon very cheaply. If you're in the state of Washington, you can use our lending library and borrow materials, tools, some books, switches, things like that from us for free. I have a question for you, Nellie. Are you doing AAC evaluation funding through your school? I know some districts say, yes, we can do that. Some districts say, no, that's a private thing. How does it work for you?
Currently in the district, one of the districts that I'm working for, we don't have a set process of acquiring an AAC device. And in the past, it's been more like, I bring in an iPad. My iPad has a few AAC apps, and so I'll trial them out, but I'm only here like once a week and I cannot leave my iPad here. And so I can't get enough data to support like, yes, this child would benefit from it. But like I said, I would come in, think of or trial a device in the 30-minute sessions that I see them once a week. And then I would say, so-and-so would need a AAC device. And then I send it to the not superintendent, to the special ed director. And then they will say, yes, we have funding, or no, we don't have funding, which most of the time we don't. And so I'm trying to find an alternative for funding because it's kind of overwhelming to think that I really want to get this child a device, but I don't have the means to. And so finding different sources would be great. Even I know how Sarah said that we want to ensure that the student has a device for the school, specific for the school, but I want to do more for them.
Mm-hmm. So Nellie, you can borrow as many iPads as you want from us. Well, in a way, you can borrow multiple iPads if you need to trial AAC apps with multiple students. There is a return shipping fee, but I would get on our lending library list for that if you need those apps to stay at school while you're not there for trialing. I know that's not a permanent solution for you, but there's also a lot of grants and options that way that we'll talk about more during our funding meeting.
Sorry, I do have a question about the lending library. So I got a device last year from the lending library and it said something about insuring the device. Can you tell me what that meant? And
yeah,
who's liable for the item if it's broken or lost?
Good question. So when you return the device, so it's free to borrow, but you return it and then you're supposed to insure it when you return it, and then you pay for shipping back, or your district pays for the return shipping. And when you go to UPS or whatever to return it, you can ask for an insurance, like say, please insure this for up to whatever. And on the packing slip, it should say what that insurance number is. But it doesn't cost you to insure it. It should just be the cost of shipping. I believe that your district probably is liable, but I don't think we've ever had an issue really. Before we wrap up here, Lori said, would your district be willing to fund 1 to 2 iPads that can be used as a trial iPad and returned after the trial period? That's a great hope, Lori. I know some districts have a little lending library within their district. And then Marissa said, for funding, our school recently got a grant which has helped with a ton of trial devices and student-specific devices. We use AbleNet for some students. Some students, families buy their iPads. Some students get purchased through DDA. Yeah. If we identify a student needing high-tech AAC, the family doesn't want to purchase or can't, and AbleNet doesn't cover, then the school district will purchase. And Marissa, I'm not sure what the grant is, but that's a really great point because there is a grant offered through OSPI right now. It funds assistive technology and AAC devices in districts. And there's priority right now to districts who haven't received that grant in the past because it was also available last year. I know that we're doing training for some districts who got that grant and they wrote training into it. So it's really wide as far as what you can get with it. So
I think this is the one you're referring to, the Digital Equity and Inclusion Grant.
Thank you, Sarah. You're on
yeah,
top
so
of it.
the link is in the chat too.
Great. So next week, if you're able to join, I'm sorry, not next week, next month, on the 7th, we're talking about AAC training in your school district. And after that, we have funding sources. So
and spread the word too. If you have other people in your district or wherever you might be that would be interested in joining, you can have them join too.